Okay, so today we are talking to Tracey Lee. Hello, Tracey.
Hello.
You're well today, I hope.
I'm very well, thank you.
Good,
Yes.
good. That's nice to hear. So, before you give us an idea of the kind of things that you do, perhaps you could give us some kind of background into kind of your life and how you've got to the point that you are at now.
Yes, absolutely. So my eight and a half year old self in the little Wendy house at the bottom of our garden used to hold classes, and my schoolmates would come and let me teach them. Which I look back now and think, oh, okay. And I do remember in a school report, one of the teachers saying, I've enjoyed being in Tracy's class too. So maybe there was a little hint there at what I might end up doing. And then my father died when I was very young, and the eldest of four, and I had to go to work when I finished high school because we couldn't financially afford any further education. And I spent a few really happy years. I went to do the management course for John Lewis in London and loved it. I loved the theatre of retail, and I loved the learning aspect. They were very, very heavy on training people, and I loved that. And then I
Was
moved.
that kind of behind the scenes at John Lewis, or was that kind of in the shops, or both? Or?
You rotated. You had 4 different placements. 3 were on the shop floor that I had, and 1 was behind the scenes.
Right.
And I am and continue to be fascinated by people. So, and I liken perhaps training a little bit and teaching to theatre. You're owning the space. I am becoming the teacher, the trainer, the coach, which is not to suggest I have multiple personalities. And I think retail was very similar. And I loved asking questions to get to the nub of what they wanted and satisfying that need, perhaps over and above what they wanted to do. Had a little bit of experience of managing people. Fast forward, my last stint at retail for John Lewis was probably, it's about 30 years ago now.
Right.
And I was working not in London, and I managed at one point a team of about up to 30 members of staff, so mixture of part-time and full-time, and enjoyed that. Then moved to Oxford and had the opportunity to sort of reflect on what do I want to do. And I worked for a number of quite large SMEs, and marketing became quite a strong focus. So when I decided to take the plunge and become self-employed about 20 years ago, for quite a few years, I ran my own marketing and PR consultancy, and very successfully enjoyed it. And alongside that, this was very new at the time, I launched a business networking group aimed cheekily at women, but it was for men and women.
Right.
And we did have men who joined. And that was very, very new at the time, and grew that to several groups before I sold it. One of the things I loved was we always included a training element, as to just come along and chat to people and, flog your wares, so to speak. So another training aspect of my life.
Did you find it hard to kind of get people involved in that kind of networking? I know a lot of people find networking very difficult.
I think, well, it was prompted by, I distinctly remember, I won't give you the details of where, etc., but I distinctly remember going to a meeting, and I had, this is gender specific, so apologies. I had a man on either side, and they literally had their backs turned to me. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. Surely networking is about everybody getting on with everybody. And so that was my motivation to launch the group that I did.
Right.
And I am somebody who needs constant challenge. So once it had become successful, and no, I didn't do any marketing really. It was all word of mouth, and that's been the same throughout my whole career. So no, I didn't find it difficult. It's very, the networking landscape is very, very different now. And yeah.
But there was self-evidently a need for it then, if it was that easy to do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I found it easy to do. I found
Yeah.
it easy to do. And I've run my whole life with two things. If you ask someone, people can only say no. So we had some fantastic guest speakers. And alongside that, is anyone going to die? If the answer's no, then I'll probably have a go.
Yeah.
Now, I realise not everybody has that same attitude to risk taking. So I'm not suggesting for a second that everyone should embrace that. But it's worked for me.
Yeah.
And then I had a call from a fellow PR consultant, and he asked whether I'd be interested in teaching marketing at the local college, further education college.
Okay.
I thought, this is my moment. I'm finally going to get to teach. And very succinctly, because I'll be talking for the next hour purely on this, that then escalated, and I taught various subjects. I taught business for quite a long time. And also some of my favourite kind of teaching is teaching apprentices who come for their 20% off the job training here in the UK.
Okay.
And I qualified as a teacher. I was sponsored by the college. So I can now say to my 8.5-year-old self,
I've done it.
I'm a qualified teacher. And I've gone on from that to do, done some formal research, so a short course master's, which was focusing very much on mindset and to do with teachers, trainers, with their attitude towards using technology.
Okay.
And then most recently, probably over the last year or so, I've transitioned in the main to doing business training and coaching.
Okay. So, I mean, what if I came to you as a potential client and you said that you focus mainly on business training and development, how would you define that to me? What would you say that it was that you did, and the kind of people that you help? And
I think if they came to me and asked that question, I would be asking questions to determine exactly what they want. In my experience, whether it's been marketing consultancy or business training, coaching, people very often come with, I think I need this, or we need this for our staff. And then actually, by the time we finish talking, it might be that they need that, but there's other work to be done beforehand, before we get to that point. And I think that's really important as a consultant, that you make sure that you really establish their need. Otherwise, it will be the easiest thing in the world to go, yes, that's fine, let's book it in. But that's not very professional, in my opinion. I particularly like working. I remain fascinated by this, Kevin, that people are promoted into positions and they might be able to do the thing, you probably know what I'm going to say, but they have zero training in how to train or mentor people, or how to delegate, or any of those things. And there's just an expectation that they will learn along the way. And I liken it in some ways to being asked to pilot an airplane somewhere and just say, oh, you'll work it out, Kevin, as you go along. You'll be fine. We see real potential in you and we think you're going to be great. And then, a whole catalogue of problems can come purely because they haven't been adequately supported. So
do you think that's a kind of fault of the next level of management above, or do you think it's just a function of business? I mean, I've been involved in a lot of businesses, especially ones that have grown very fast, where that has happened because people just haven't had time to even think about that kind of thing.
I wouldn't necessarily say fault. I think perhaps there's an unconscious assumption because you've seen great things in this individual, so therefore we just assume. And or it could be that individual, perhaps it was line manager, they find it really easy to delegate. So again, there's an assumption that other people will do as well. And I've found this an awful lot with the people that I've coached. It just comes up again and again and again, which I find really fascinating, genuinely. And I'm sure there's some formal research done. Why does this happen? But
And what's the biggest kind of the biggest, is it that inability to delegate? Is that the biggest issue, or just the lack of understanding of how to manage people?
The things that come up again and again: lack of confidence, afraid of delegating, don't really know how to, and a fear, which is probably wrapped up in the other two: people don't want to upset people. There's a really good book called Radical Candor, spelt the American way, the Candor, by Kim Scott, I think it is. And one of the messages from that book that I always remember, clear is kind. So,
Right.
Think about the language you're using. You just take the emotion out of it. And actually, if you can learn to delegate well, you are actually helping that person rather than perhaps hoping they're going to do what you want to do. So I have worked a lot with people on language.
Right. Yeah.
What language do they use? And I always use the example of clear is kind.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Otherwise, we almost start these conversations with an apology. So, just a small bit of role play, Kevin. Oh, I wondered if I could speak to you, Kevin. I know you're really busy, and and all of this preamble, rather than preparing the person, so front loading the conversation, making sure that they feel that they're in a psychologically safe space, and then just delivering the message.
Yeah.
And yes, that clear is kind message is something which everyone I've shared that with, they have quite a big aha moment. And it's more our stuff, isn't it? So when we go into that space, whether it's training or coaching, I think it's important, as is relevant, yes, to share our experiences, but we need to be mindful of not taking too much of our stuff into the relationship.
Exactly. I mean, this is what I was going to ask you. Do you kind of approach it? I mean, I would guess every situation is different, but do you kind of feel that you would approach it more from a coaching aspect, where you will try to get these solutions to the problems from the person you're speaking to, or are you kind of guiding them towards things that you think would be beneficial?
So in any teaching, in my opinion, in any good teacher or trainer will use some coaching skills.
Yeah.
Because if I need to tell you how to create an invoice, I need to tell you and show you how to do the thing. But beyond that, it's far better that I use questions to help you come to the answers. So the business training, it's very experiential. We're not, wedded to the PowerPoint or whatever behind us. And I will read the room. You could be delivering, as I am at the moment, for quite a large SME, 3 cohorts, the same content, and reading the room, asking questions, and you will always find that you focus on a different part of the training to a previous cohort. And I think as a business trainer, it's really important that you have that ability to flex in the moment and to make a good judgment. So what do these people in front of me really need? And how can I find that out in relation to the topic that we're covering? And I enjoy that. And I think, it's really important that you enjoy it, because then you're conveying that enthusiasm and that interest and that excitement, where it's relevant. It helps, I think, that stickiness in our, neural pathways. The more interesting and engaging you can make the content, which is feedback that I get again and again and again, it really helps them to take away more than just one point that they can put into action that day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And do you find that there's sometimes a conflict if you're brought in by a management team, for example,
Mm.
to do a certain thing, and then when you get into the situation with the people that are involved, you find out that that's not the thing they need at all.
That's a great question. I haven't experienced that as such. I can think of one course that I run probably about 4 times a year for it's actually for the university here in Oxford, and there is sometimes the expectation of the content that we're covering is sometimes a bit skewed, and that's not to do with how they've been invited to attend the training. So you just manage that in the moment, and in a nice way. We're not here for that today. But make sure that they're signposted to the right person who's going to answer those questions. So no, I'm really comfortable with adapting and flexing in the moment. And if I think we don't need to cover that part of the content because they're very experienced at that, I will just shelve it. And we will spend more time focusing on something else, because it's always very, very focused on what are they going to get out of this and how are they going to measure the impact. So for me, it's not enough that people come and they have a great time. That's nice. But if that changes nothing, that for me is in the so what. What was the point? And companies are investing a lot of money in this training. So I will always have conversations around the impact at the end of these sessions or the project. And interestingly, they're very surprised when I go down this route. And
oh, really?
And sometimes they haven't thought about the impact.
And quite often, I would guess they haven't even thought about measuring the stuff that they do anyway before you've even started.
Exactly. And I don't know whether it possibly is in part to do with my training as a teacher, lecturer, whatever you want to call it, because we're very driven on how are we going to know whether learning has taken place, and we have to be able to state that in writing. But yes, people come to the training, oh, I think we could do with this. Okay. How will you know whether it was worthwhile the time you've taken out of your busy schedules and the fee it's cost? And you can see people thinking, oh, we hadn't really thought.
Yeah.
To me, I think that's a way of adding value as the business trainer.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
it's always the case. The boss would go, right, I think this section of people needs more skills around time management. I will bring someone in to teach them time management, and then that job will be done. And that's kind of the end of it.
Exactly that. And or people are in different situations, people are told to go to some training. And I'm not saying that that's wrong per se, but I think we really need to understand, or people need to understand, why have I been invited to go to this training? Because for me, in any situation, whether you're training, coaching, it's more asking and less telling.
Yeah, yeah.
If I just tell you how to do good time management, the chances are you're going to leave the training and maybe be none the wiser, because you're going to go straight into other meetings, and by tomorrow you'll have forgotten all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas if I'm drawing it out of you rather than telling, the hope is, this is living in Pollyanna land, which I love to live. It's a very
best place to be, isn't it?
It is. It's literally, the research, there's a huge amount of research out there, thinking very, very much about how can we make the learning stick.
Yeah. And what's the kind of the stuff that you do? Is there a kind of predominant theme to the things that you're doing, or is it very varied? Or
can be quite varied, depending on whether I'm working as an associate or I'm doing my own stuff. So at the moment, we've got a lot of performance management training going on, which can cover a myriad of things depending on the client. Presentation skills. Unbelievably, in 2023, we still have people who will stand and read from the PowerPoint. And actually not even think about things like voice projection. So we're talking really, really basic things here. But again, nobody has asked people to think about this.
Yeah.
It's just please go and present on that. So again, I've asked them, what do you want the audience that you're presenting to take away, and how will you know? And that's been a real, oh, we hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, because people get stuck in a habit.
It's right. I'm going to do a presentation. I have created content. I am now going to deliver the content.
Yeah.
They haven't thought about necessarily how they could deliver that to the best, deliver the best outcome, and then not thinking it can be a tick box exercise. Yes, I've done that. Great. What's changed as a result of you doing that? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's the same with the marketing. What's the objective? If you're coming to me to do anything that I do, what is your objective? Why are we having this conversation? I don't ask it like that, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's really important to me. I want to feel satisfied that I am giving them what they need and not what they think they need.
Yeah. And it just varies. It varies so much, doesn't it? I mean, from individual to individual and business to business. It can be anything,
It really, really does. And I feel very privileged to work with people from various industries, and the majority come with an open mind and a willingness to engage and learn, even when certain things are a bit tricky.
Yeah.
For example, some of the courses we talk about self-reflection.
Okay.
Which I think is probably one of the most important life skills that we can have. And I'm hugely delighted that it is being taught at my almost 7-year-old's granddaughter's school.
Really?
Yeah, the school report came back at the end of the summer, school report, and then a second sheet with 3 self-reflection prompts.
Wow.
I literally had goosebumps. Yeah, I just thought it was fabulous. So, but you get some people who, it's very normal. If I ask anyone to reflect on something, our mind will go to a negative something.
Yeah.
And you sometimes see when you're training, if it's about reflection and why should we use it? Why should we use it with our staff? How could we use it? Some people, I don't want to use the word resistant, but they struggle to just view self-reflection, just reflecting on experience and not marking it good or bad, just reflecting.
Yeah.
And I find that really rewarding when I can lead someone sort of away from that negative. Otherwise, our mind goes to our most dominant thought and our actions follow. So we don't want to feel really not great about ourselves all the time. So I think if you've trained as a teacher, trainer, etc., you're so used to having feedback that feedback muscle is really well oiled.
Yeah.
See metaphors there, but
no, that's interesting. That's very useful. So, I mean, there's a question we ask everybody, and I think you're going to find it quite difficult to answer because it sounds like you have effectively been involved in the kind of thing you do from the age of about, what was it, 8? But we say to people, if knowing what you know now and the journey you've been on through your life, if you were to have to do something else now instead of what you're doing, what would you like to do?
So that's a really good question. I feel very strongly that everything I've done in my career, it's all dovetailed and everything has complemented each other. So I'm very happy doing what I do now. I am fascinated by neuroscience.
Okay.
And I, like any area, I think it's vast. Would I come back as a neuroscientist? Possibly. Or maybe psychologist. I'm hoping to do a master's in psychology next year. So this is it's all tied into what I said earlier on. I'm so interested in mindset and motivation.
Yeah.
And so often we think we can't, and we tell ourselves this stuff, and we feed our, everything we say and think leaves a blueprint. So how about we not think or say some of those things? So yeah, a mixture of psychology and neuroscience. What would that make me if I combine those two areas?
What's known as a brain box.
I don't know if you've done any formal research, Kevin, but when I had the opportunity to be sponsored a couple of years ago, and I thought, oh yes, this is my thing, but it's a rabbit hole. It's a wonderful rabbit hole. But yes, something that, and I hope, well, that's why I want to do the masters, so that I can do more research. So probably come later than I envisaged in my career and in my life, to collecting these meaty qualifications. But I think things come to you when it's your time.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much. No, that's been very interesting and very useful. Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Kevin.
Great.